Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Super excited about the program tonight. I'm Mika Bondi. I'm the chair of the Women's Leadership Circle, which is the executive council of the Women's Leadership Network of Brooklyn Law School. And the mission of the Women's Leadership Circle is trifold. One is to create a great community of women lawyers from Brooklyn Law School, which is what we're doing right now. The other is to create great programming for all of us, for our careers and for our lives. And finally, it's about giving back, philanthropy. So we've actually endowed, and I'm super proud to be part of that effort, endowed a student scholarship. And we've had 4 recipients so far. I think I had that number right? 4? I've been involved with women's issues, and obviously I'm a lawyer. So I'm super excited about this particular panel because I think that a lot of us early in our careers don't even imagine that we could be like general counsel somewhere, or that we could be on the board of a company, a for-profit company, a not-for-profit company. And I think it's time to start thinking about those things because we all have incredible skills, we all have incredible networks, and we can all be contributing, to a larger enterprise in that sort of way. So I'm really excited to hear from our panelists today. I'm going to turn it over to Dean Meyer, but first I'm just going to say thank you to the panelists, Stacy Cantor, Jody Krieger, Ann McDougall, who are all Brooklyn Law School alums and have been on or are on boards. And we had to find our moderator from Cardozo Law, but Liz Esman is here from Heidrick & Struggles, and she's in a really top-notch executive recruiting firm that, in addition to placing people at top-level jobs across the legal industry, also places women and men on boards. And so I think her perspective will be really interesting to hear. So anyway, I'm Mika Bondi again. Just so you know, my background is I was in-house for many years at HBO, at Time Warner Interactive Video Group, at Time Inc. And then, of all things, I decided to go back to a law firm. So now I'm at Perkins Coie, and I'm co-chair of the Film and TV Group. It just shows you that your career in law can span many different things. And so I'm just excited to have you all here and have you listen to these amazing, amazing women doing amazing things. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dean Meyer. So he's just going to provide some words, and then we'll get started on the panel. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much, Mika, and I want to add my thanks as well to the panel and to the Women's Leadership Council, and just my appreciation for all the work that you do in supporting Brooklyn Law School and our community. It really is so impressive, and this program on a very important topic in its own right about women's representation serving on boards. But I just wanted to note that it follows on an earlier program that Deborah Epstein-Henry helped make possible for us with the Association of Corporate Counsel last month, which was for students and alumni to a similar panel to sort of how to break into in-house counsel positions. And so for this sort of the next step, how to serve on boards is a wonderful follow-on to that. Obviously, it's an incredibly urgent and important topic. You may have seen that in March, Deloitte issued a report noting that something around 23% of board members worldwide are women, but only less than a quarter of board members are women. That actually represents progress, but the projection is that at the pace of progress currently, it would be 2038, I understand, before there is gender parity on boards. So this program to encourage more women to consider serving on boards is a wonderful contribution towards trying to make greater progress in that regard. So thank you so much to all of you for being here, and again to Mika and the council and our panelists for making this possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean. I'm just going to turn it over to you, Liz, to start it up. Thank you.
Sure. Lovely to be here today. Maybe I'll introduce myself, and then we can go down the row here. I'm Liz Esman. I am a partner at Heidrick & Struggles. It's a retained executive search firm I did go to Cardozo. Thank you for letting me in the building today. And I practiced law before pivoting to a career in executive search. And I kind of justified my legal degree and credentials with my focus in search on recruiting senior in-house legal talent, and I also work with boards. So I'm really excited about the conversation that we'll have today, and I'll turn it over to Ann.
Hi, so I'm really excited to be back. I was class of '83, along with Diane over here, and I practiced law for quite a while, mostly in-house. I spent most of my career at PwC, and I was eventually general counsel of PwC US, and then global deputy general counsel based in Paris. I then pivoted and left the law and went on over the business side. I became the COO of a global venture capital fund whose customers were the poor. I then got to do a wonderful program at Harvard, and then I became the president of a national nonprofit focused on second acts for the greater good. And today, I am in the portfolio stage of my career, so I do a bunch of different things. I serve on boards, corporate, one nonprofit board. I also do some advisory work. I'm an impact investor, so I work on our portfolio of impact investments, and I'm the co-creator of a group of fellowships that essentially trains leaders to use their public voices in writing op-eds and placing them in the area of climate change and women's rights. So I do a lot of different things, and I love them all.
Can't follow that one. I'm Jody Krieger, class of '88. I'm a partner at a private law firm, Kleinberg, Kaplan, Wolf & Cohen, where I advise private foundations and public charities and other tax-exempt organizations. I also am the past secretary and trustee on the national board of the Crohn's Colitis.
A little closer because it's big. You can't hear you in the back, that's all.
Okay. Oh, good for you.
Hands is right here. I can't hear you. You're not talking into the microphone. You're all talking.
Okay. Where was it? Okay. I was on the national board of Crohn's Colitis Foundation and served 6 years as a trustee. That's
Okay.
what I do.
I'll take it from there. I'm Stacy Cantor. I am actually celebrating my 40th law school reunion this year. It's hard to believe. I met my husband here. My career's been pretty linear. I spent almost my entire career at Skadden Arps, joining as a summer associate and working my way up. I became a partner in the capital markets practice, ultimately went on to lead the capital markets practice, did a lot of corporate work representing companies, had a lot of involvement in things like succession planning and risk management and liability management. I eventually chaired the diversity and inclusion initiative at Skadden. We now would call it diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I was on most of the major committees at Skadden, the policy committee, which is essentially our governing board, the compensation committee, the partner selection committee. I ultimately decided that I wanted to have another act, and I wasn't sure what it was going to be. And I decided that my skills were best suited to serving on corporate boards, and that would be what I wanted to do next. So I took advantage of an early retirement program at Skadden a couple of years earlier than I had to. But I was 59 when I first thought about this next step. So I think one of the reasons I'm here is because it's important to think about it earlier. I was fortunate to join my first board just as I retired from Skadden. It's a clinical stage biopharma company in the rare disease space, and I chair the audit committee. It's NASDAQ listed. And then about 4 years after I joined that board, I recently joined my second board, Oppenheimer, the middle market investment bank, where I now chair the nominating and corporate governance committee. That, together with being president of a large synagogue on the Upper West Side and a couple of other not-for-profits, keeps me busy. So I don't feel retired, and I'm very engaged.
Great. Well, thank you for the intros. This is truly an impressive group of women here. So I know you're all eager to hear perspectives, and we can jump in. And I think that with the panel today, we're trying to really have this be a conversation and a dialogue, and you may have questions. I think we're steering towards about 40 minutes of questions, and then we'll do a question and answer session. So really excited for questions from the audience as well. And for the first question, I'd love to pose actually to Jody, if you could start us off. You mentioned your role on national nonprofit boards, and for those for folks in the audience who might not know or be aware of the difference between the different types of boards, it'd be great if you could lay a foundation for everyone around the different types of board service, and others may want to weigh in as well.
Well, I can certainly give you my perspective on a nonprofit board, why I joined, how I got involved. My son got sick at age 10, and as a mother of a sick child who's not a doctor, I was like, okay, what can I do? So I found the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. I started to get involved. I did a 50-mile bike-a-thon, or at least I trained for it. I broke my ankle the day before, but I did raise $20,000, which is a very important part of serving on a nonprofit board. It's, when you're on the board, it's give and get, not just give or get. So I served on the New York chapter board, and the executive director of the New York office found me, and she put me up for the national board. And I served on the national board for 6 years. I was on the audit committee, I was on the governance committee, and eventually, the last 2 years, I served as secretary to the executive director of the board. Now, you put a lot of your time and your energy into it. A lot of it is a very dedicated, passionate board service because of why most people serve on it. We are very involved in research. These are medical boards. Pharma is a big thing with a nonprofit board. But this also gelled very nicely with my legal practice because I do represent tax-exempt organizations. And one of the things that I do with the organizations that we represent is I police the board, because the board wants to do a lot of different things, and sometimes based on the rules and based on perception and based on bylaws, they can't do certain things the way they want to, but there are ways to do things that serve the needs of the various organizations. And that was part of my role of Crohn's and colitis, and it's been part of my role in my legal career. What can you do as a private organization? What can you do as a public organization? Nonprofits boards, the boards typically are not paid. The officers are. The executive director is paid. The people who run the day-to-day machine that we call, they get paid, and they're supervised essentially at a very, very high level by the board of directors. So they need to really gel with the board of directors, and that's where you have, a positive board experience. So we have a major DEI initiative, which has been for the last 2 or 3 years, because nonprofit boards, like most boards, they're the old boys network. They're, just men who get involved in board service, and they're generally, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but they are Caucasian men who have always been part of the old guard. And diseases and nonprofit interests and the causes don't look like that. They look like this audience, they look like the street on, that you got off on the train. They look very different. And they need representation, and they need boards that can really look at the issue for what it is and relate to it to really make a connection.
So nonprofit boards will mimic many of the issues that you'll face on for-profit boards, corporate boards. Often people ask, is a nonprofit board a stepping stone to a for-profit board? And I think the most important thing is to join a nonprofit board if it's something that you're passionate about and where you really care about the cause, because that's the reason you're doing it. I would say to somebody, if you want to look to a nonprofit board as something that might be helpful to ultimately finding a corporate board position, to me it's more the networking that you're going to do, the people you're going to meet on the nonprofit board is going to be important, because networking is a critical aspect of a board search. And I think the other thing is to look at the skills that you might derive as part of your work on the nonprofit board. For example, if the nonprofit board is going through an executive director succession or some other issue that, again, mimics the kind of thing that you're going to do on a corporate board, that could be very helpful in your board service as well.
No, and I would agree with that. And I think, one other thing about the reason I have a rule, I only serve on one nonprofit board. I do some advisory work because that's not fiduciary, and you can do a project here or a project there, but a board. Working on a nonprofit board can be a lot of work. And if you take it seriously and you're passionate about it, can be even more work. So that's good. And then, of course, the other categories are corporate boards. And I would further divide those. They could be divided infinitely, but into private and public boards. And I've served on both. I've served on a few pharma company boards that are public company boards. And there, it's very serious, and they have all kinds of reporting, quarterly reporting obligations, and they have to, very, very heavy compliance load, and so that's a piece of being a board member there. You're very visible, you're voted on in a public process, but it's exciting and it's fascinating. I mean, on private boards, you have a little bit, I've just joined a new private board, which is also an ESOP, and employee-owned company, and we have a lot more freedom to craft rules or craft approaches that are not focused on short-term earnings, since our earnings are private. But I think in all three cases, the public, the private, and the nonprofit, the principles of good governance are the same. There's a difference between oversight and management. You're responsible as a board for selecting and overseeing, and if necessary, firing and replacing the CEO, and you're a steward of the organization. So I think there are more, in fact, I just gave a talk on this to the private company board last week. There are more similarities than differences between all three of those categories of board membership.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for that. And I think, hearing you, Ann, talk about the variety of boards that you've served on, I think it might be great for the audience to hear more about how did you land your first board, or how did you land your first corporate board? How did that happen?
Yeah. It's not easy. And I would second Stacy's advice, start early, because if I had one thing to do I would have started my search earlier. I couldn't serve on a corporate board while I was a partner at PwC, and you probably couldn't do it at Skadden either. But I didn't start right after I left PwC. And so start early, especially now, because particularly public boards are putting in mandatory retirement ages, which come sooner than you think, because they want you to have served 2 full terms before you retire. So you need some running time, A, and B, getting your first board isn't always easy. So I got my board because I decided I wanted to do board service. I love that blurry line between a mission and business. I love working in the world of business to accomplish things in this world. And I did a board, I talked to a lot of the headhunters, but I also put the word out. I have board bio, I had a board bio, and my first board, which was in pharma, which I knew nothing about, I had no experience in pharma, was through a friend who knew me and respected my common sense. And out of the blue, I never would have expected it, that led to my first public company board. And I remember saying in the interview to the CEO, I don't know anything about pharma, but I know what I don't know, and I'm a very quick student. And so you have to give me permission to ask the dumb questions. And he said, please do. And I did. I would ask questions because I think that's really a helpful piece of being a lawyer. You're used to going into situations, sometimes you don't have all the facts, you don't know the sector, but you know what you have to find out. And so that really helped me, and that's how it started. And indeed, the next board I got was all through my network. I've gotten only one board through either a search organization or a professional. There are a couple of women's organizations that actually get board listings, but most of it is through the network.
Yeah, the network is really talking to everybody you know, and really being deliberate about it, sitting back and thinking, who do I know who might be helpful in a board search process? Who do I know that's on a public board or on a private board? GCs of public companies. Do you think about the accountants you might work with, or the investment bankers you might work with? In addition to, your friends. Once I had decided that I was retiring from Skadden and that my goal was board service, every single person I met heard it. Everybody knew that I was interested in joining a board. And then after I got my first board, everybody I knew knew that I was on what I hoped was my first corporate board. It came out naturally. I will tell you, my first corporate board, the clinical stage biopharma company, came from one of my partners at Skadden, who, a good friend of his from years and years, was getting ready to take a small company public, again, in the rare disease space. And he knew, he had heard I'm interested in corporate boards, and he said, I think you should meet the CEO. I think you two would get along. We did. She was interested in my skill set because of my experience with public companies. She's a scientist, and she was putting together a board. She had a lot of people who were in the healthcare space, in the drug development space, and she felt, and I felt, that I could add value. And I mention that because this partner of mine was 20 years my junior. So, often when we're networking, we tend to look up, right? We think the people more senior to us can be more helpful to us. This is somebody who was 20 years my junior, who I had mentored from the time he came in the door at Skadden. So when you think about your network, you really need to think in sort of 360.
Exactly. I'll have to mention at some point.
I could tell you about my second board. My second board was a cold call from Heidrich.
It wasn't me.
Okay, this is not a setup. I actually got via LinkedIn a message from somebody who I didn't know, and it's very easy to overlook those things. And it was a board about this board opening, which I subsequently found out was at Oppenheimer in the first reach out. There was no indication of what it was for. It's an invitation to have a conversation. And it ultimately turned into my second board seat.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to make one more point. One of the things you may hear as you start your search, particularly for corporate boards, I don't think it's as much the case for nonprofit boards. We don't really want a lawyer, they'll say sometimes. And retained search firms often say this because they have lawyers available to them. And so they don't need a lawyer on the board. And it's really interesting, even though I wasn't practicing law anymore when I was looking. But what I found in each case, each board I was on, is that a lot of the things that came up really would benefit from legal training or legal awareness. M&A, I went on to another board through an activist slate, and we were in the middle of a fight, and then we were in the middle of an acquisition. And I remember the first day, my board colleague saying to me, once we were parachuted into that board, we'd like you to chair it through this whole thing with the acquisition, because we're scientists and pharma veterans. We don't know anything about this. And so I did. And so even though there may be resistance to you going onto boards, it's kind of, I would call it old-fashioned, because I've seen again and again the skill sets that we bring to the boardroom, in fact, are incredibly useful. And so just want to warn you about that perception and arm you, and hopefully you will be successful in getting in anyway.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Anne, because there is definitely in the search world this notion that we see disappearing that you referenced, where, do boards want lawyers to serve on their boards? And I think increasingly, I think the sentiment has really shifted. And so for folks who have been interested in board service, but maybe felt constrained, what would I bring to a board? Would a board be interested in having me serve? I think there's a lot, as Anne was alluding to, many skill sets that lawyers really bring to the table around potentially M&A, governance, just having a discipline around thinking, and maybe others.
As compliance becomes more complicated, regulatory issues, risk oversight, those are all things, all skills that lawyers really bring to the table naturally. So a board is not going to, or a company is not going to want you on their board because you did, these 10 cases or those 12 deals, but because of the skills and the expertise that you took away from them. And that's how you need to start thinking about, your career, is what am I learning from this? And what skill do I have as a result of what I'm doing?
Including strategic problem solving.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I told my children. I said, if you don't know what you don't know what you want to do after college, go to law school. It's the best education. It teaches you to think.
That's true.
And that's what lawyers bring. They bring the thought process, they bring all of the various skills that we learn when we practice, or we just... Look, I'm a big proponent for the education.
Agreed.
Yes. Well, and we could just have a panel on just how amazing lawyers are. I think we would all agree.
That's a little self-serving.
I wanted to follow up on, Stacy, something that you mentioned about the network that you built and that you activated around your interest in boards. And I think that's something that we can all be thinking about, even when we're just maybe thinking about dipping our toe in the water, because you just never know how someone is plugged into or what networks other folks are plugged into. Maybe they're on a leadership council and maybe they're looking for board members. Maybe it's a nonprofit. Maybe it's a corporate board. And I do want to say too, and this will also come across as self-serving on my part, but when you do have headhunters reach out to you about opportunities, even if it's not something that you're completely interested in, but if it's something that sounds, maybe someday that could be something I'd be interested in, I would encourage folks to, spend the time networking with the search professional so that you might become a resource to them. You may have people in your network who you'd recommend for a board if that's what they're calling you about. And it might be something that you'd be interested in down the road. And it's hard to know that without having the conversation and kind of putting it out there.
I think that's important, because while the search firms don't fill all of the board positions, often, even if a company is filling a board position on their own, they will check with a search firm that they work with just for vetting of a candidate. So you really don't know. I've had the opportunity to be a reference for people called by a search firm. And again, you try to do just that. You try to be helpful. If a position's not right for you, maybe it's right for a friend of yours or for a colleague. And I think, to me, it all illustrates the importance of your network, because sometimes when you're going to hear from a search firm who's going to reach out to you about a position, the whole reason that they got to you is because they reached out to somebody in their network who happened to be part of your network, knew you were looking for a board position, understood your value proposition for serving on a board, and that's how you get on the list. So I think it is important to think, if you really are serious about serving on a board, to start writing down what it is you think you can offer a board, and start talking to people. Start talking, everybody you know, really, all your friends, everybody, and business contacts, they should all know. And you're not asking them, oh, can I join your board? But you're asking them, maybe they become aware of another board that's looking for somebody, or maybe they introduce you to somebody else who's better positioned to help in your board search.
And not only one time.
Oh,
It's a process. It goes on for years.
Yeah.
When you update your board bio, it's another excuse to remind that network that you may have an availability. In my case, 2 of the companies where I was on the board were sold, so all of a sudden I had room in my portfolio. That was an opportunity to remind my network and the search firms of my availability.
Yeah, and it does take a while. I'd be curious to know, Jody, how maybe your experience with Crohn's and colitis when you were joining that board, was that a lengthy process to join the board? Because sometimes it can take, 4 months, 6 months.
It did take, as a matter of fact, I was on the governance committee, and what the governance committee does is we fill the open board seats, and we look at the people who are coming off the board during that cycle, and what do we need? What do we need to fill our needs on the board? And it's about a 9-month process. We start pretty immediately when the new board is put on, and we don't offer the new slate until December. because it will be voted on in the March meeting, but we don't pick the exact slate. It's interviews with groups of board members. It's vetting through the president, the executive director. It's, people suggest, and then they're vetted individually. And then, there is a decision committee as to who's going to be the first level, second level. So, because on the board that I was, we needed doctors, but we also needed financial people, and we needed attorneys in certain areas. We needed people who would be appropriate for compliance. They didn't have to be compliance people, but we had to be comfortable that their brains work that way. So it's a very involved process, even on a nonprofit board, when you get to the numbers and the outreach that a national board has.
Yeah, so it definitely requires patience, and you can see why someone might say, start early. I'm interested in getting thoughts from the panel. Just what is it that's your favorite thing about board service?
Well, I like, on the corporate boards, I really do like being in the oversight role rather than the down in the trenches and the day-to-day role. That's actually fun and plays to what I'm very interested now. So that's, I think, the thing I like the best. That I would also say I like business. I like being in business and helping to make strategic decisions. And I don't mind making the money either.
Yeah. I enjoy the collegiality that I feel in the boardroom, and so that was very important to me in making sure that the fit was going to be right for me and whatever boards I was going to join. I love being with people I can learn from. Yes, we talk a lot about strategy and risks and opportunities, but then there's a lot of slogging through internal audit reports and other things that aren't particularly exciting, but they are important as part of our oversight role. I love, as Ann said, I love being the one to ask the questions and think of the issues, and I don't have to draft the documents and find the answers. And so for me, it was really like a natural extension of taking my business expertise and being able to contribute it in a different way, and continue to be relevant in the business world. And I am enjoying it very much, and I've enjoyed the committee work and now the leadership work of the committees.
With the Crohn's and colitis, I just like making a difference. I like being involved in the organization that I felt we will find a cure. Approving all the research and efforts to bring a community together. The people that I served with were very collegial. They were really, really good, nice people. The doctors, the finance people, everybody just really gelled because they were all there for somebody. In my role as an attorney who advises boards, I happen to advise a few boards that I've become very passionate about, and I really like the fact that the work that they're doing, and again, it's really making sure that they can continue to do the work and not become the next byline on some newspaper, so that detracts from what they're doing. And that's a good part of what we do.
Can I just say another word about, because what you said
Sure.
caused him, on the nonprofit piece, I totally agree. You have to be motivated by the mission. You also have to do a little diligence. So I'm on one nonprofit board now, as I said, called Strong Minds, and we do a mental health care intervention in Africa. And it's incredible because women, particularly in Africa, suffer from depression, low-income women, and there's no focus. It's stigmatized. They become so depressed they can't hold a job, feed their family, their kids drop out of school. And the intervention that Strong Minds does, for $100 a patient, turns their life around. 75% of them are depression-free after a year after this treatment. So it's really exciting. But that board was referred to me, that opportunity, through a friend of mine who is in kind of a foundation that makes grants to organizations like this. And so I ended up taking 6 months to decide to join that board because I knew it was going to be a lot of work. And I talked to the CEO probably 4 times in that 6 months, and also board members, because I wanted to be sure that the people that I was working with were compatible and competent, and that we could really make a difference. And it was only after 6 months that I agreed to join. And it is a lot of work. So I'm just agreeing with what
It
you
must be
said.
heart-wrenching work.
It is, but you go to Africa, I've been to Uganda, and I've seen the changes in the lives of these women, and it's transformative. And so that's one of the reasons I enjoy the board.
Yeah, we represented, and I took the lead role in representing an organization that actually created a school based on the Israeli model for children who were affected by what went on in Rwanda a number of years ago, and advising them and speaking with them and seeing all the things that the organization was doing was, it was very emotionally draining. So unless you are ready for something like that, whatever side you come from, be it, a public side where you're advising them and, you're being paid for it because you're the lawyer, or you're doing it because it's, just a cause of yours. It's very heartbreaking, and it requires a lot of emotional strength. So you have to think of that when you get involved with a lot of these organizations, public or private.
Right, you have to be bought in, I think is what you're saying. It's a commitment that you're making of time and energy and your reputation. So really being thoughtful about the boards that you commit to your point.
Because that's one thing you don't want to disappoint.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right. And do we have time for, I think, one more question and then Q&A? Sure. All right, okay, all right. Panelists, best advice for the folks in this room who are thinking about boards. They're thinking about boards. What would your advice be? Top advice.
Well, it's where I started was really start thinking about it early. I think that's very, very important. Think about your skill sets. I will say it's not all easy. I mean, I went very far down the road with one search. I was down to the final 2, which in itself is actually an accomplishment, they tell me. And I will just share that what I was told from the CEO, because I called him for feedback. We had a very nice relationship. And he said, you couldn't have done anything different. We decided that a sitting GC was more prestigious for us than a retired law firm partner. And I was grateful for his honesty and transparency, but I put it out there to those of you who, may be giving this thought. And then there was another search where I had an interview, and I will mention it only because I was introduced to the search from somebody that I sit on the board of my synagogue. So that was one of the sort of not-for-profit connections. But it's really start early. For those of you working inside corporations, there may be opportunities for you to sit on subsidiary boards, within the company, and that starts giving you board expertise. It starts building your portfolio, and that's something that you can do.
I think my best piece of advice, and I come from a different perspective, is really believe in the board you're serving on. Believe in the public mission, the private mission, whatever it is, believe in it, because you are going to spend time. And you're going to spend time doing things that are very exciting, and you're going to spend time doing things that are mundane and boring. And if I sat in one more audit committee meeting, I was going to shoot myself, because that's what I do every day in my office. So really, really connect with the board and the mission of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo the start early. That was my learning in looking back. Get the word out. And more concretely, I mean, when you have decided you want to serve on boards, corporate boards in particular, start working on a board bio, because it's a process, not a product. You're going to be changing that as you go. But thinking about, as Stacy mentioned, what is your value proposition besides what you've actually done? What are the skills you bring, right? And you might also want to look around at some of the really excellent organizations that support board directors. There's women corporate directors. There's extraordinary women on boards. You have to have been on a corporate board to get into that. Stacy and I are both members. And there's a few others, and they will help you hone your bio and think about how to use your network. Quarters of your network that you might not even remember might be the one who is the referral. I know someone who heard about a board opportunity from a cab driver. Long story, but you never know where it's going to come from. But start early, take concrete steps like your bio, like joining one of these organizations, and learning what you can.
Yeah, I participated in an organization called Direct Women, it was originally formed, I think, in like 2007 as a joint venture between Catalyst and the American Bar Association, and the goal of it was to increase women on corporate boards. And today, like 40% of our alums are serving on corporate boards. It's like a boot camp, and you can apply for that. But I mention it because if you go on their website, you can see the board bios of women lawyers, which may be more helpful than just seeing board bios generally.
Yeah, good idea.
Great. Great, thank you. Thank you all for the very practical guidance. For Q&A, what's the best way to hand it over?
I think anyone who has a question can just raise their hand, and we also have mics that we can share so people, people
Good take one.
So we have a question over here.
Great, should I?
Right about them. We can share.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Celia. I finished law school in 2017. Here's my question. As somebody who's interested in joining a board without any prior experience, serving on the board, what are some of the things that we should be mindful of in terms of limiting our potential liability for damages or, insulating our potential assets or existing assets?
I'll give it a stab. I mean, it can, if you're talking about a nonprofit board, that's one thing. If you're talking about a corporate board, typically, you're going to have D&O insurance as a board member, and you want to understand what that is, and what the limits are, and what the deductible is, and ask around. And also, under the relevant law, and you're closer to this than I, there's something called the business judgment rule, which essentially, as long as the process around making a particular decision was sound and thorough, most decisions made by directors in their capacity as board directors, corporate board directors, are protected by the business judgment rule. The courts won't second guess that judgment. So I don't really lose sleep over the liability aspect of this unless there's some, huge mistake. But I don't generally lose sleep over that.
I don't lose sleep over it, but every time I get a board package before a board meeting, I think about it. Because, as a director, we have fiduciary duties, but we have duties to be free from conflicts and to be informed. And if you take all of those seriously, and exercise your business judgment, I think you're fulfilling your responsibility. And that's why you have to ask the hard question, you have to ask the unpopular question, because sometimes you're asking a question that is questioning management. It's not necessarily criticizing, but it's your obligation to question.
To take care and be
Yeah.
loyal.
Yeah. When you see a red flag, you ask a question.
That's right.
Always read what you're signing. Don't just sign things because everybody else is telling you what a good decision this is for the company.
Hi, I'm Amy Guerra. I graduated in 2000. I'm over here. How's it going? I'm also evaluating my second act because I'm about to become an empty nester. So my question for you is for corporate boards. What does the time commitment, what does that look like? Because it sounds like you're all on multiple boards. So can you work full-time and do this, or is this a full-time job that you focus on the corporate board itself? Thank you.
I think you have to talk to your employer, but I think what most people will say is that if you're working full-time, you can do one board. That's generally the advice there, and, presumably you would speak to your GC or CEO, or, and that would be where I would start if you are working, is to ask your CEO for support. I don't know if you're at a law firm or at a company, but whatever it is, whoever it is, they may be in a position to introduce you. But I think it's really, if you're working full-time, it's one board.
One corporate board.
Yes,
Sometimes
one corporate board, not-for-profits as well, just to round out.
And
what you
indeed,
do.
there are some employers that actually encourage their C-suite anyway to serve on a board. I mean, for a long time, the CEO of Coca-Cola required all his direct reports to be on boards, non-competitive boards, and because they would raise their game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the articles that we sent around talks about a very well-known partner at a big law firm who's on 3 corporate boards. That's not typical.
Yeah.
That's an unusual situation.
Yeah, and
If it's a nonprofit board, it depends on the actual board. Some of them, there's a lot of work for, and some, depending on
Some
which
not.
committees you're on. So, also depends on your desire to commit.
And the time it's not constant. It's more cyclical. Once you know what your board calendar is, you know when you're going to get the materials to prepare. I chair the audit committee, so I have to factor in speaking to the auditors, speaking to the internal auditors, speaking to counsel, all to prepare for the audit committee meetings. Now, that cyclicality can go totally out the window if you wind up in the middle of, an M&A process or some other, bet the company kind of transaction.
That's right.
Yeah, or I was going to say, a CEO search can take up a lot of
Yeah.
time, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to second what Ann said about, we definitely see operating executives adding a board with their current employer's permission and encouragement, and that can be a really fantastic opportunity. But certainly a time commitment where you would really need to get that buy-in before
Yeah, absolutely.
signing up.
Absolutely.
Great question. Sure.
Hi, Jennifer Covell, 94. We heard earlier about the statistics of women actually being on boards. I'm wondering what some of the challenges either you have faced or that you would advise us, like how do you, the challenges that are unique to being a woman on a board, if you can speak to that.
I haven't really felt them. I have to be honest, and that's because my first board is half women, and my CEO is woman. My second board, I felt it when I came in, there was only one woman on the board, and I was the second woman, but there was tremendous receptivity, and now I've only been on that board since October, and in January, we added a third woman. So that board was, I think, deliberate in the way it refreshed its board. So, you have the same, you have the same challenges in the boardroom that you have in any other room, where some of them are sort of trite already, but a woman will say something and then, somebody else says it, and that's when it's heard. So, that still exists. So you have those same kinds of things, and so you want to amplify if a woman says something. But I think I was pretty prepared for it, having grown up in the corporate world, having been at Skadden. I was just used to it, I guess. Perfectly honest?
Yeah, no, I didn't feel it that much either. Maybe I was lucky, but again, I was at PwC for 17 years. I was a partner, and I was the first woman on the management committee there. And so you just get used to it.
Yeah.
And I never felt like my voice in the boardroom was diminished. And I've been a chair twice, asked to be the chair, so maybe we're
I know
lucky.
these aren't good answers. I know these are not good answers, but they're real answers.
Yeah. And I do think there is some wisdom out there that says, as women start to get onto boards and fill out, and those good numbers we heard are really just for the larger companies. When you go below the Russell 3000, you're not going to see those kinds of percentages. And so one kind of meme I've heard is that when you're coming in as a group and gaining representation on boards, 1 is really hard, 2 is a little less hard, but 3 is a critical mass.
And I feel that. We're three, at the Oppenheimer board, we're now 3 of 9.
Yeah.
I would just say, I think it's great that you both have, had these amazing careers and are having these amazing careers, and it's like so empowering to hear this. So I really appreciate it. I think having, as you do see the numbers, become increasingly diverse on boards, I think it will just continue to be the case. So it's really exciting for me as a recruiter to be a part of, helping to, ensure there are diverse slates that are being considered for roles. Bless you.
And just about diverse slates, one of the things I've also seen on one of my boards, I was on a call with a board member today, and I've seen obviously diversity, racial diversity as well, but other kinds of diversity. So this young, brilliant board member that I was on a call with today, I think he's 35. Just black, 35, a successful entrepreneur. And so as the boardrooms, at least that I've been in, diversify in other ways besides gender, it gets easier. It just gets easier.
My opinion, we are our worst enemy. Women are their worst enemy, okay? I truly believe that we are a critical voice and we are desirable board members, but when we are asked to be on boards and it gets down to the nitty-gritty, oh, I don't have the time. We make excuses for reasons not to put ourselves out there. And
I was talking to a woman who is on a bunch of corporate boards, and she is also a vice chair of, I think, a charity focused on lymphoma. And she was having a conversation with somebody about a potential board seat. And she said, well, I meet this criteria, and this criteria, and this criteria, and this criteria. She said, but I have no healthcare experience. And the man who she was talking to about this board seat said, what do you mean? You're vice chair of the largest organization that focuses on multiple myeloma. Of course you have healthcare experience. And she said that was a wake-up call to her, and she got that board seat. So it's really, and I think what you're saying, don't be your worst enemy. Don't focus on, checking every box perfectly the way we often think we have to do it. Look at the bigger picture and put yourself out there. That's exactly right.
take your perfectionism that we typically have as women.
Yeah.
Because we always have to do more, put it to the side. Just show you're positive, and it'll be a lot easier, and we'll make more of a better impression.
Should I? Hi, Diane Edelman, class of '83, and I got to be a student here with Ann and Stacy, and I love seeing their incredible success and hearing their advice. And I just wanted to add in, I'm someone I'm back here at Brooklyn in an administrative position, and have been in academia for 30-some years, so it's a very different world. I'm not seeking private board membership or anything like that, but what you've made me reflect upon today is my role in being on a nonprofit board for many years, and I know that this is a room full of alumni, maybe some students, or maybe the parents or grandparents of some students. It's never too early to encourage those people to get interested, because my board membership stemmed from volunteer work that I did early on in my career. And years later, even though I've been out of private practice for 30-some years, I'm still involved with the board of a nonprofit where I was a volunteer lawyer. And now I can connect with the people whom I helped many years ago who are running things themselves. So again, it's nonprofit, but it's something that gave me great joy in working on, and where we can encourage our students here, great, you're, especially a school like Brooklyn, which is so externship oriented and clinically oriented, get involved now, and who knows where this will lead. It's a very different kind of thing. The other thing, professionally, for people here, there's probably other people in academia here, get involved with the organizations that are active in academia, because again, it's different. You're not, you may be controlling the finances of an organization, but it's a great way to build camaraderie, to get to know people in other educational organizations or at other schools in the U.S. or around the world, and to build ideas. So there's all kinds of different versions of this, and I think this is a really inspiring panel speaking on all this.
One thing I'd like to add, which I don't know that people either do know or don't know, but involvement in nonprofit board service, their tax return is public and your name will be on it. Not a bad thing, it's just something you need to know.
Yep, that is correct.
That your name will be connected with a particular cause, organization. You may be very proud of that. You may not want the world knowing it. So be aware of that before you serve on a nonprofit board.
Hi, question. I guess the specific is how early is early, and what's the next step? So I'm in a company, I'm probably 2 years from retirement. I do serve on one of our subsidiary boards. I've been business, legal, but I'm not allowed to serve on any boards now. I was on a non-for-profit board for years, and I'm doing, Stacy, I'm talking to everybody, but I'm still 2-3 years away from, being able to go out there and do this. So what's my best next step?
I would put together the board resume. I would put together the board bio. I would start looking at some of the skills matrices that you see in public company proxies, which go through the different areas of expertise that companies are looking for, international, technology, digital, risk management. You could look at any companies. Like today I pulled Coca-Cola because I think that their corporate governance disclosure is pretty good. Start looking at those matrices and start thinking of what you've done in terms of skills, not as legal successes, but in terms of skills, and start writing this stuff out. The board resume is like a resume. The bio is more of a narrative where you're telling your story.
Okay.
And I would start putting together both of those documents. And then you might go to, there's the National Association of Corporate Directors you could think about joining. PLI has a Directors Institute for Corporate Governance every November that I always go to. You just start hearing things, start learning things. It gives you more to talk about if you get to the point of an interview. And start talking about, you deal, I'm sure, with accountants and with investment bankers, and you can start talking about, this is your plan.
The only thing I would add, I think that's exactly right. You don't want to jump the gun too much, but the other thing is that if you join, I think Women Corporate Directors has a very good boot camp, and there's a few of them, the one that you went to as well. And go to them, because you'll get better at putting together your board materials, your bio and your CV, and you'll get practiced. And by the time you are ready to really get out there, you're going to be well up the curve. And I wish I hadn't lost that time.
I was starting from behind.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it seems like that would be great networking, too, to build a community, to start building a community of people you would go to if you were on a board and you had a question, or you were evaluating a board opportunity and you want to get someone else's input. What do they think about? What did they look at before they joined a board? So it's a great way to build that network. And I think the short answer, which you probably already heard, the short answer to your question is, it's not too early, and you're doing all the right things by thinking about it now. Because, and Jody, I think you mentioned that the board cycle, you're thinking a year out, you're thinking 2 years out, you're looking at who's going to be rolling off the board and when and what skill sets are you going to be losing, where you need to find those people. And I've talked to people in the market who will tell me that they're slated to join a board next year, a full year away. It's already lined up. So if you're 2 or 3 years out, it seems like that's probably a good time to start thinking. Any other questions? Let's get to the slide.
Just close it out. Thank you, Liz and Jody. This is not on.
Stacy. Thank you all for coming. I thought this was an incredible panel. I think all the speakers are going to stay for a little bit of our cocktail
Yes.
hour, so feel free to approach them and ask them further
Definitely.
questions. But like we all said, start early. That's why we're giving you this program now, and all the skills, the networking skills, the figuring out who you are, the personal branding skills, all of that stuff. Being an excellent lawyer is always a great place to start to do anything in this world. So thank you for coming, and hope you enjoyed it. And make sure you sign in and out, because you are getting CLA credit on top. Thank you very much.